안녕하세요. 빅샷 인터뷰 글로벌 그루에게 듣는다 김민지입니다. 오늘은 250여 년간의 역사를 자랑하는 베어링자산운용의 아시아 멀티에셋 대표와 이 시간 함께 준비했는데요. 지금 바로 김도 대표 만나보시죠. Okay, thanks for joining us today.
That's a pleasure.
Okay, let's start with China. We can't talk about anything without China at the moment. So, what are the risks about China?
Well, at the moment, global investors are very concerned that China is already in a recession. We don't believe that, but that's what global investors are concerned about.
But personally, do you think that China still has a power to boost its economy?
Oh, absolutely. No. We think that China actually, in total, actually is still growing. Because if we look at the services sector and the consumption sector, actually they are growing fine. But it's just the manufacturing sector and the construction sector and the export sector which are doing poorly.
Okay, but some analysts say that the Chinese government lost control of the market. Do you believe that, or are you with that idea?
And I think that like anywhere else in the world, even in the US or even in Europe or Japan, when you are facing a situation where you just went through a big boom and then facing a bust, it's always difficult for any government to try to control that. But we think that what the government in China has been able to do is to actually do a reasonably good job, actually, because it wasn't easy to control that.
We touched about the China issue, and let's look deep into the Fed a bit, the rate hike. But the rate hike is coming through. So when will it be, and how should we deal with it, the event?
Well, the interesting thing is that investors have been talking about the U.S. Fed fund rate hike for nearly 1.5 years now. So this is one of the most well-covered events. So in fact, they were wishing that Ms. Yellen did that and then stop. And that would have been actually a better outcome than not raising rates at all. So I think that the Fed's rate hike, I think, is well discounted in the market. So when it happens, actually, it could be a relief to investors rather than concern for investors.
Okay, but what do you think about the environment of the emerging market with the rate hike? I mean, it's going to react differently to the US or EU or the Japanese market, isn't it?
Yes, in a way, but I still don't believe that that is a strong argument for emerging markets. Emerging currencies have weakened dramatically over the past 6 months or so. Have a look at the Brazilian real. The Korean won obviously has weakened as well. Yes, I agree. But they weakened not so much because of the Fed fund rate hike fear, but I think that emerging currencies have weakened because of China growth fears. So I do think that if China were to aggressively cut interest rates and inject a lot of new capital spending in the economy, actually emerging currencies and emerging equity markets may rise rather than fearing the Fed fund rate.
Okay, fair enough. You raised the issue of the currency, so I'm asking, do you expect another special move from the government?
Right. I don't think that they will engineer another 3 to 4% devaluation like they did some weeks ago. But I do think that it all depends on the strength of the US dollar over the next 6 to 12 months. If the US dollar were to continue to rise strongly, then I'm afraid that the yuan may have to depreciate again a little bit next year. But I don't think that the yuan will depreciate a lot. And the reason for that is because I think that the Chinese government is well aware that they are not going to be able to win if they were going to engage in a currency war. Because if they were going to do that, then everyone will lose. The Asian nations will lose and China will lose as well. No one wins.
Moving to the Korean market, our viewers would be eager to know about the view. How do you evaluate the Korean stock market?
Well, the Korean stock market, similar to the Chinese stock market and many other Asian markets, actually is very cheap. So the Korean market, one can always say that the Korean market has always been cheap. But I think that at the moment it's very, very cheap. So I think that in the case of Korea, we need to see stronger growth. If China growth is stronger and if global growth is stronger, then I'm sure the Kospi will do very well.
And one curiosity, when you invest into the Korean market, where do you compare with? Is it Japanese market? Is it Chinese market? Is it Taiwanese?
Well, you know, in the case of the Korean stock market, there are very famous global stocks. Those are the multinational corporations which are selling their products and their services everywhere around the world, and there are some domestic stocks. So as far as global investors are concerned, I think that we are quite willing to look at both global and as well as domestic stocks. But the one thing which I think that global investors are a little bit concerned about still at the moment is on corporate governance. And I think that corporate governance issues in Korea actually have improved over the last 10 years. But I'm afraid that they still are concerned over the corporate governance issue in Korea. And the other concern which investors have about Korea as well is the fact that a number of Korean companies are sitting on a lot of cash, but they refuse to actually pay out as dividends, or they refuse to use that cash to buy back shares, unlike the American companies or the British or Australian companies or Hong Kong or Singapore companies, because when they have a lot of cash, they tend to actually either pay out in dividends or buy back shares. But in the case of Korean companies, some of them have a lot of cash but don't want to do anything, and they don't want to pay out as dividends, or they don't want to buy back shares. But I must say that that trend has improved, but I think that they can do a lot more.
Okay, fine. That leads us to the last question. Can you share your investment tips with our viewers? What is the best way to overcome this tough market environment?
The best way to overcome the short-term volatility is to actually buy some very good quality stocks and not to look at the price for the next 2 months. If you don't want the volatility, you should look at something like a global multi-asset fund, because those funds actually are doing the asset allocation for you.
Okay, that's it for today. Thank you very much, Kim.
Thank you for having me.
네, 지금까지 김도 대표와 이 시간 함께 하셨습니다. 최근 글로벌 금융시장의 최대 변수로 언급되고 있는 미국의 금리 인상 시기, 그리고 중국의 경기 둔화 이슈로 꼼꼼하게 살펴봤는데요. 여러분들 투자 전략 세우시는 때 꼭 참고해 보시면 좋겠습니다. 글로벌 그루에게 듣는다는 오늘 여기서 인사드리겠습니다.